There we go. Megan, thank you so much for coming on to Make America Civil again to have a civil conversation.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to come talk about important issues.
All right, awesome. Well, before we get started, I always ask, please tell us a little bit about you.
My name is Megan. I am married to Zach, who was on your show not too long ago. Um, I was born and raised in the Midwest. I guess you could say I'm like a Midwest mutt. Like I was born in Missouri, raised in Illinois, but all my family was from Iowa, so I can't really say like one specific place. I grew up in a town of 5,000 people that all looked like me. Everybody was white.
Mm,
And we had like the stereotypical families. Like you had the Asian family that owned the Chinese restaurant, and the Mexican family owned the Mexican restaurant, and there was one black family. And of course, like nobody liked them, and it was really terrible. So that's the way I grew up. My parents did not raise us to be prejudiced in any way, shape, or form. Um, but I can honestly say that I did not engage with people of color until I was probably a little bit older, like 6 or 7. So moving out to California was a little bit of a culture shock for sure, but now I can't really imagine life any other way. I work for the Department of Veterans Affairs, so I'm a federal employee, and I've worked there now for 2 years, and I've been in the federal government for almost 4 now. So I really do enjoy that. Um, but yeah, that's a little bit about me.
all right. All right. Wow, that's really cool. You work with veterans. So do you work with them one-on-one? Do you work with them, or do you just like work with paperwork? Like how do you work? Do you interact with veterans, I should say?
So I can.
Okay.
So I work for Veterans Benefits Administration. So my whole objective is to help veterans become service connected for disabilities acquired while during service. So say a veteran um, hurts their knee during service and they still have issues with it now. I just have to like connect those dots with like service treatment records and like current medical treatment records, and then I gather all that evidence for them, and then it gets sent off to another person to get like a rating, and then they get like a certain percentage of disability, and then they get paid for that. So I work the front end of those claims. So sometimes I have to reach out to veterans, um, not all the time, uh, just because it's hard because we have a way of communicating like through letters and emails and stuff like that. So that tends to like be the avenue of choice. But I just spent my whole week last week volunteering for a sports clinic for severely disabled veterans. So like vets without arms and legs, traumatic brain injury, MS, ALS, stuff like that. And I worked the surfing event. So I was at the beach all last week, and hence why I'm kind of like sunburnt. Um, and that was really neat because I got face to face contact with these people, and it really put like a deeper meaning to my job because,
Yeah.
when you're staring at a computer with just names and dates and times and all that kind of stuff, it really becomes impersonal. So to be able to see the faces attached to these claims was really special. So,
Okay. All right. But switching gears a bit, we
yes.
are here to talk about primarily, I feel like this conversation is centered around the First Amendment, which,
Yeah.
if we could summarize it, it is a freedom of speech.
Yeah.
Talk about, specifics of like the media and stuff. But in general, we talk about like freedom of speech. And we also know in California, if anyone pays attention to politics, like hate speech and things like that kind of mitigate what free speech is when that
Yeah.
actually makes no sense because if it's free, then it shouldn't be mitigated or it should be regulated. But I'm giving my answer. I want to hear. So tell me why. First of all, let's start with why do you think free speech is so important?
Well, first and foremost, thousands and thousands of people have died on that principle, defending that liberty for us. So I think like to keep that going for their sake alone is really important. Um, but nobody wants to be told that they can't say what they want to say. Um, Everybody wants to be able to express how they feel and how they think, and not to be told that the way that they think and feel is wrong or stupid or hateful or whatever. Um, I couldn't truly imagine a world or to like live in a place where I was told that I couldn't speak the way that I wanted to. It would be so weird. It would be so weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, that's kind of what's going on in
Yeah.
your great state of California right now, and specifically when it comes to younger kids. Me being a teacher myself, this really bothers me. For kids to be able to express themselves in ways that are suitable, but then also teachers being able to teach kids in a way, in an environment where freedom of speech is once again allowed. So, what's going on in California with this whole thing with teachers and students and free speech?
Yeah, so not too long ago, so just a little bit of background. So Zach's grandma and his Aunt Brenda have worked in education their whole lives. Grandma has her school. Aunt Bren is the principal, and it's private. It's a private Christian institution. Um, and we go over to their house every once in a while. We were actually hanging out with them tonight. But not too long ago, Aunt Brenda was telling us how the state of California has passed legislation, and of course it's not through the whole process yet, but they've passed legislation that is getting rid of gendered language. So teachers won't be able to gender their kids that they're teaching. So they won't be able to use him, her, boy, girl, like stuff like that. They also have are going to be renaming history to X story, like EX story, to get rid of history because of his.
Can we just all take a minute to laugh?
Because, and like up in San Francisco, like I I just can't with that place. I really want to go see it, but like I at the same time I'm like, will I even be allowed there? Um they renamed, like a manhole, like the little holes in the ground that you go down into like the sewer. Instead of calling them manholes, they're
Yep.
now maintenance holes. They completely wrote legislation to get rid of the gendered language of a utility device in our streets because we don't want to offend people. But yet the streets are covered in human feces and priorities. I'm just really confused.
Okay, well, so that's a lot right there. So we started with, the classroom all the way to, the maintenance hole, as we'll call it. Don't want to offend
Yeah.
anybody. Which is, in my mind, I'm thinking like, yeah, who cares? But I guess that's my patriarchy coming out. Or my mansplaining, person's explaining. Anyway,
You're making me feel uncomfortable, Manny. You're mansplaining too much.
okay, okay. I don't mean to catcall you. I'm sorry. Um, okay. Even though you're married to my best friend. All right.
I know,
So,
right?
um, so okay. Now let's start with the problem with this whole concept of teaching kids or not even allowing teachers to speak to kids that want to be maybe want to be called him or her like right because I know like I've listened to people talk like oh hi my name is like X I guess we'll go with and like pronounce he him like how is that going to like have you thought about how this is going to work in the classroom like is this something that your aunt or anyone has talked about.
It really hasn't been talked about too much because I still think it's in like, I think it either passed like one half of our legislative body or whatever. But our biggest concern when we were talking to his Aunt Brenda was, well, is this going to affect the private schools? Because are they going to force you guys to have to do this as like a Christian institution? And she says, as far as right now, no, which is a good thing. Um, it just, it's just such a slippery slope. Like when I think about it, I'm like, it's just gonna landslide into so much other stuff, into the point where it's like, am I gonna be able to look people in the eye anymore? Like, is that gonna be considered offensive, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and like for me, we don't have kids yet. Um, Hopefully one day soon, maybe we'll see. But it's a scary thing to think about, like sending my kid to school out here, because private schools they're expensive, you know, and living out here is expensive. And it stinks because it's like, okay, your public school system is free, but at the same time, do I really want to send my child into a place where they're being brainwashed, in a sense, by this liberal agenda? I hate saying that. That kind of felt good to get out, though.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's very true. And so, yeah, so I think that's something that needs to be taken into an account, because especially like when you look at it from the perspective of a potential parent or a parent who disagrees, right? And, I know we use the word like free education, but in reality, it's taxpayer paid education, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, does the taxpayer voice at this point, right? Because the majority might want it, but the minority might not want it. And is it just going to be majority rules, which in a democracy that works, but we're not a democracy. And maybe in a state level we can be in some sense. But the point is this: like if that is what's going on, what would you do as a parent to avoid like your kid, like what would you do if you were in that situation?
Like if it was
Like,
like full on, like that was the world we were living in.
yes, and you're
Um,
kissing your kid goodbye to go to kindergarten.
yeah, I I would hope that Zach and I are in a place where we could send our kid to either our church's school or grandma's school. Um, I was homeschooled growing up. I was homeschooled from the first grade to my senior year of high school. Um, and when I think back to like the issues that we were dealing with, my mom chose to homeschool us because she didn't want us to be in a public school environment, because she didn't want us to be exposed to like the liberal agenda that was being pushed then, which is 10 times less than what it is now. Um, I don't know if I could homeschool my kids though. I think if it was bad enough, we would have to consider something like that. But I really hope that private school is going to be an option, because honestly, I don't know what I would do to like think that my kid is going to a place where they're being told that they don't know what they are. Like how kids are confused enough as it is. Like way to like strip down their basic identity, you know? Like you don't know what you are yet. What does that even mean?
Yeah.
Like
Well, I would always ask, like, how do you know they don't know what they are? It's like I guess it's I think it's the fallacy is so obvious. It's like one of those, like, the argument is so bad, the fallacy is so obvious. It's hard to get the other person to see the obvious fallacy, right? Because it's in their face. And so when you try to expose it, like, to them, it's nearly impossible because you're speaking a different language at that point, right?
yeah.
But it's so irrational. There's no way to rationally handle it.
Yeah.
So like it's like I don't even get this whole thing with like gender neutrality, right? Like as a female, and knowing that you as a female, it seems like especially in California, you would be in the minority because it's like anti-feminist not to think that way, right? So do you feel like, are you a feminist? Do you feel like you're being anti-feminist? Like how do you respond to like something like that?
I okay. Okay, you're going to laugh at this, but honestly, feminism to me is exhausting. It is exhausting to be a feminist. Like I tell people all the time who ask me that, it's like I don't need to do that. Like it is, I hate to say this, but it's so much easier for me to let Zach worry about 10 times all the stuff that feminism is telling me to worry about. It's just easier to let him do it. Like I know that sounds kind of bad, but it's like I don't need to be this crazy independent person. Like, don't get me wrong, like I'm not like completely dependent on Zach for all my needs. I could live at least 24 hours without him. But I'm not all about like putting him down as a man. I joke about it because it's funny, but I don't live my life that way. I really truly believe in like the design God has for marriage, which is the man is to be the head of his home, and I'm his equal. But yeah, I don't want to say subservient because I don't think that sounds good, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Um, so like I guess I'm kind of an anomaly out here, but I also think that is attributed to like my roots of growing up in the Midwest. The Midwest is a lot more conservative than it is out here. Um, I did take a time there to like really step back from like what I was raised in, like conservative wise. I would definitely say I am libertarian when it comes to most political issues. Like, I don't care what you do, just don't infringe on my rights type thing. I like that's just how I am. But as far as feminism goes, it's exhausting and I really don't want anything to do with it. I really don't. If that makes me a bad woman, I guess that makes me a bad woman. I don't know.
Well, I think I should distinguish the third wave feminist wouldn't be too happy. Where, because I've talked to people who would consider themselves feminists who probably wouldn't have a problem with your answer. Maybe with the whole male headship thing they might struggle with, but I think that's more of a Christian thing,
Yeah.
which I think, obviously, I think is the right thing. But all that to say, like, I mean, obviously, I agree with you. But if I say it, well, that's just
Eh.
my masculinity coming out, and my toxic masculinity. So that brings me over to
Oh,
this back to this gender neutrality thing, specifically with this thing about they're changing the word history because it has his in it. Now, you already mentioned that there's a slippery slope. So, do you see any other potential dangers just in that alone, changing the very, like, because right now I'm a teacher
yeah.
and one of our subjects is history,
Yeah.
right? Like, so, like, the very name of the subject is hit, like, yeah, American history, Western history, Eastern history, Christian history, Jewish history. You have all these different types of histories, and so getting rid of that. Do you see there being a potential like negative thing that could come of changing even just the word history? I mean, it's just one word though, right?
Yeah, but it's been called that forever. Like since the beginning of time, I feel like I don't see the point. Like who legitimately who is being offended by that? Like that's what really bugs me is that you have this really, really, really small group of individuals. We'll call them the alphabet, I guess you could say. Um, and it's almost even like a certain sect of the alphabet that really is, I think, more or less pushing the gender neutrality language. Um, and what bothers me is that small sect of people is trying to push such a large agenda that it's concerning because it's just happening. They're just people are just bowing down to it like, "Oh, these people have been oppressed for so long, we're just going to give them what they want."
Okay, yeah,
You know what I mean? And like don't get me wrong, like I don't I don't care. Like I'm very libertarian when it comes to homosexuality and all that kind of stuff. Like if that is who you are and what you want to do, then by all means go for it. Like but don't infringe upon my rights. And that's where it's getting muddled for me is you're pushing an agenda that's telling the schools that could potentially teach my future kids that they don't know if they're a boy or a girl. I don't like that, you know,
yeah,
because there's such a small percentage of people who are, you know, transgender, binary, fluid, whatever they call it
yeah.
nowadays. You know, it's so confusing. It's so confusing. It's more confusing now to me with like all like the different like ways to like identify yourself than it ever was. Like we just started off with like male and female, but now it's like I'm gender fluid, binary, non-binary, alien, whatever. And it's like it really breaks my heart because it's just like, and I think you'll agree with me on this, it's just like boiling it down to like people are just really searching for their identity. And when your identity isn't rooted in Christ, you're always going to be lost in searching, you know? And you're always going to want to put labels on yourself when in all reality, it's like you have one label and it's to be a child of Jesus and to be loved by him, and the rest follows after that,
Yeah.
you know? So,
Yeah. And I was I've been listening, not reading. I've been listening to Ben Shapiro's Right Side of History, and one of the things he talks about is how there has been a separation from our country's Judeo-Christian roots, and so you have like there's like a couple different spectrums, but what you're getting a lot now is you're getting people that are coming out more libertarian, which Zach and I are both like libertarians, and it's glad to know that you're leaning that way too. So
yeah,
good for
yeah,
you. But you have this kind of with the libertarians, you have this hyper individualism, like this Ayn Rand sect, where it's like everything's about the individual to the point to where it's difficult to talk to them about anything when it comes to the collective, right? The collective's not a good thing. But then we look at like being a libertarian, but also being a Christian, and we see the good in community, and we see the good of having common foundation,
yeah,
right? And so if like for the hyper individualists, I feel like they get to the point to where it's difficult for them to see the benefit in having like a foundation that is common, right? All having a common foundation, which I think happens when you have a community. And I think because of the Judeo-Christian worldview being separated from the Christian from this whole our whole political ideology, what's happening now is exactly what's happened. Like we see the results of that happening, right?
yeah,
And so like you were just saying, and if you want to add to it, you can. But I completely agree what you just been saying. Like it's all rooted in our of being image bearers of Christ, right? We
yeah,
all bear the image of God, and because of that, there is a foundation that's laid that we should rely upon. And instead, we have libertarians who, like the atheistic libertarians, who are really removed from that. But then on the other end, you have these like democratic socialists who only think of the collective, and they
yeah,
don't think of the individual, right? Because like you were saying, like if you want to do that, you can, but they're thinking about the collective, but they're ignoring the individual.
mm-hmm,
It's
yeah,
like the
two
collective rights
extremes,
trump yours. Exactly. So if you
yeah.
want to just add to that, if you want, you can. I don't know. What do you think about all my little rant?
No, I completely agree with you. It's really hard, and it's even more difficult, like just given how diverse America is, because there's so many different people here, and everybody's trying to either find their own little group or like be their own little individual person. And I think that we've kind of like lost this sense of at the end of the day, we're all Americans and we live in America, and we have to think about it as what is best for our nation, our society as a whole. And it's hard because, you know, originally I don't think the founding fathers really wanted the government to be as big as it is. It's really, really big. I work for one of the agencies, and I can say that it's probably too big. Not talking directly about VA, but like the government in general. I think that people's needs would be better met on the state and local government levels for sure.
Yeah.
Um, Unfortunately, I don't see that happening. We've allowed our government to be too big, and now because of that, you have a generation of young people that's rising up and it's like, well, the government's so big, they'll just fix everything. And I'm telling you right now, they're not going to fix everything. The government um, has a tendency to do things really slow and not as good. as the private sector. So yeah, it's just, I don't know. I would like to be optimistic and say that, oh, one day there's just going to be kind of an awakening and people are going to come back to that American spirit and it's going to get really like warm and cozy again. But I mean, the last time that happened, two planes busted into two buildings and 9/11 happened and thousands of people died and then a war started that technically hasn't ended yet.
Yeah, no, that's very true, which wasn't even approved by Congress. Um,
No.
but that's a different conversation. Um,
Yes.
but I think you're right. Like the great tragedy of 9/11 is what brought us back together
Yeah.
as a nation. And because I mean, I remember going to church that next week, and it was just jam packed. It's like, oh, no one cared a week ago, and now look at you.
Yeah, you're all
You know?
scared half to death and want to
Yeah.
be in church close to Jesus and all that kind of stuff. And that's what's scary because it's like, what could possibly happen next to bring that type of unity? That's what scares me because I can't imagine something like 9/11 happening again, as in like people hijacking airplanes again because of how tight security is at airports now. Given somebody that's worked at TSA before, people give them so much crap, but they do a decent job. They really do. Like I feel safe all the time flying in America. I couldn't imagine planes ever being hijacked again. Um, which is like what would happen. Like it's scary to think about, but it's I don't know, it's alarming. I also think that unfortunately our media has pushed an agenda that America isn't as unified as everybody thinks. I think America is not as divided as we think. I just think it's portrayed that way, that everybody hates each other. When in all reality, like here we are having a civil conversation
Yeah.
and you're black, I'm white, I'm a woman, you're a man, and it's fine. Like
Yeah.
I don't feel anything. I'm just like, oh, it's just Manny, you know? Like,
Yeah, for you it is, but for many people, I am the evil one.
yeah.
No, I'm
Yeah.
just kidding. All right. No, and I think you said you hit a lot of good points, but I think with this like this new religion of global warming on the rise, I mean, it really just seems to be more of a religious sect than anything else. Like we need to start worshiping the earth, or else we're in trouble. We need to start repenting to the earth about driving a car and using fossil fuels. But then there's no like with every religion, you have problems and solutions, right? I mean, most of them are works based. Christianity is obviously faith based,
Mhm.
and but then you have this one where it's like I mean, because there's a religious reaction when someone says I disagree with you. So like they respond in a way it's like how dare you disagree with reality, type of thing. When I'm like, is I just got done reading this book by Alex Epstein called The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels, and he talks about why
Mhm.
fossil fuels are a good thing, and like not that like he's not I'm not a globe like he's not denying global warming. What he's denying is a catastrophic climate change that's coming, right? Like
Yeah.
I just don't think that's going to happen. Personally, on my own personal life, that's what we're seeing now. And it seems like unless something crazy with that starts happening, then you're right. Like I feel like there is starting to be a division, and it's probably not as big as we think it is,
Mhm.
right? At least I hope it's not as big as we think it is. I think it's pretty
Mhm.
drastic, and I'm hoping that's not true. And I hope you're right. And uh, I'm going to err on the side of hoping that we are right, that it's not as divided, but hopefully like
Yeah.
civil conversations like this can help that. But it
Yeah.
doesn't help that we agree on almost everything.
I know. I'm trying to think like what could we possibly disagree on? I don't know.
Um, no, not abortion.
Yeah.
No, not something that can really get people upset. I don't know. I'll think of something and I'll let you guys know. Maybe you and Zach can get on here and yell at me about it.
Yeah. I'm just like trying to think like I am pretty conservative, but like I am libertarian at the same time, like personal choices, very conservative, but like as in everybody else, do your thing. Do your thing. Oh, like for me, maybe this might be something that you disagree on. I personally think that most um I think they're called Class A narcotics, like crack cocaine, heroin, stuff like that. I just think they should be legalized across the board. Um, I know that sounds a little crazy, but we watched this documentary series on Netflix called, oh, what was that called? I watched the whole thing. Anyway, it was really good. It'll come to me at the end of this conversation, I bet. But it was a whole docu-series about like the side of like the police in the drug war and the side of like dealers in the drug war. And I'm sitting here and like seeing all this crazy stuff, like what people go to, the lengths they go to like smuggle things into the country, smuggle things around. And I'm just kind of like sitting here like, but we could make money on that, like a lot of money. And then it's like, oh, well, what about all those innocent people who are addicts and all that kind of stuff? And it's kind of like, at the end of the day, they choose to do what they do. So it's like, why not just make some tax dollars on it? I don't know. I guess that sounds pretty bad, but that's just the way I think with that kind of stuff. Because it's like, to me, it's more dangerous to have an ongoing drug war where you have cartels down in South America just causing mass chaos just to smuggle their stuff across our borders. Let it in. Let it in. Let it be legalized. Let it be monitored. Let the FDA take over it. Be like, make sure that it's safe because you have all that fentanyl crap going around, killing people because they're crack and all that kind of stuff's like laced with fentanyl. It's like at the end of the day, I'd in a perfect world, I'd like nobody to be on drugs, but we don't live in a perfect world. So I'm just kind of like, well, what would be the safer option?
Yeah. No, actually, that's one that someone talked to me about a while ago, and I said, I don't know how I feel about that. Like, I'm like, okay, I will say I could, I would say I agree, actually, because I know, but I don't, because like I always hear on the side of like, you can't like legislate morality, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but then I would, because I don't know, it's multi-layered. Because then people say, then like, why are you pro-life if if you can't legislate morality? Which I think is a good question. I think it's a fair question, and I have to tease that out as well, because I think it's life. You can't,
Yeah.
you should murder somebody. I think that's one of the rules of
Yeah.
roles of government to protect the right to life. Just throwing it out
Yeah.
there. But at the same time, like, yeah, if it's, I think it would cause a big problem for the cartels and help save people's lives in Mexico, but also by legalizing it, I mean, I think there are some benefits to it. And I don't know. I took a philosophy class in college and we talked about that actually. But yeah, I don't know. I have to tease my position out a lot more, I think. But I think on the surface, someone would wince when you say, "Yeah, I agree." Like, whoa, wait, what? It's like, oh, hold on,
Yeah.
don't shoot me just
Yeah.
yet. Shoot me later. Let me finish. So yeah, so we got to find something, and we will, and we'll discuss it.
We have to disagree on something.
I'm sure we'll find it.
We will. We will, most definitely.
All right. Well, Megan, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Remember, do not hang up. I want to talk to Zach.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm gonna stop recording. But Megan, once again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time. Everyone, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Tell me how terrible or great you think Megan did today. And if you would like to come on, Make America Civil again, just send me a message, or you can email me at civilizeamerica@gmail.com. But until next time, Megan and Manny, we're out.
Bye.